How is everyone tonight? So this is part 5 of the Vzero build, and should be the last one before we move on to firmware, as we're just wiring it up tonight and a few other miscellaneous things. So tonight should be a relatively easy night. I don't think it'll be that late of a night, so we should be good to go on wrapping the assembly and the wiring of this guy up tonight. And then after that, it's just some firmware shenanigans, some tuning, and then some printing. And if anyone could tell me why one of my earpods doesn't want to work, that'd be good to know. That's a minor issue. So anyways, where we left off last week, we had the hot end all wired up. We were running the wiring down to the bottom, and we were about to finish up the hooking it all up. So in the meantime, while we were waiting, I had 16 feet of spiral wrap show up, so I can do some cable management first. Because it doesn't matter how your printer functions, it's got to look good. Plus, dangling wires everywhere just drives my OCD. It shouldn't be broken. It's pretty much brand new. It's not. I don't know why it's not. Just doesn't want to pick it up. Like it's fully charged. Come on. Yeah. The one works, but not the right. I have no clue. So anyways, we're going to just start by finishing up some spiral wrap here. Just cable manage a bit. And then we'll go on to wiring up the Skr. And it's the Mini E3 V2 that we're using tonight. So when it comes to the wiring, you do want to ensure that your loom is long enough so that it doesn't get pulled too tight at max travel distance. So for max travel distance, it would be the front left corner. Same with your Bowden tube. You don't want it too tight, because if you bend your Bowden tube, it'll cause undue stress on the filament, too much friction. So go right about there, and then you got this little printed clip here that just kind of holds it in place, and that just screws into your top extrusion. Now this little clip here prevents your umbilical from getting caught in your rear, your belts, but there's really nothing that'll keep your Bowden tube from doing the same thing. So what I do is I just take a zip tie, and then I zip tie my Bowden tube to that little clip, and that'll kind of keep it sort of in place so that your Bowden tube all the way back won't hit your belt. So if it starts hitting off your belt here, one, it could rub and potentially wear through wires and whatever and cause damage, and two, it'll cause a defect in your print. So this whole mass of wires right here, we're gonna put a little bit of sleeving on. I don't know where this starts and where this ends. There we go. This stuff is like not even $10 for like a million feet of it. Some people may not like the appearance of the spiral wrap, but when you're working for just cable management out of sight, like underneath, it's great because you can easily re-sleeve stuff, add wires to it, take it apart if you need to. So it's a good, just cable management solution. So what we're going to do here is just basically wind up our wires into bundles just to keep everything together so we're not, chasing wires all over the place. And it'll add protection. When you have random errant wires, it's easier for them to get caught on stuff, get damaged, etc. So the joys of cable management, this and wiring are like the unglamorous, boring parts of your build, because everyone has to do it. You don't really get too much out of it. And it can be a little monotonous and boring, but it's got to be done. Well, it doesn't have to be done, but your sanity will thank you later. And it just makes your build look better. And then whenever you go to zip tie something in position, you want to make sure everything's in the right spot. Because you don't want to zip tie it, find out you pulled your wires too tight. Now you got a pinch point or something. There's Z. So these ones I'll do here because I got a connector. And of course, during the stream, if anyone has any questions about anything Voron related, the build or other printers or 3D printing in general, feel free to ask away. I'm down here working on this anyway, so might as well have somebody to talk to. Now I will say the stuff was labeled as 6mm spiral wrap, which is good for up here when I was doing the umbilical. But with all this thicker stuff, you may want to get your hands on some of the some thicker stuff. Maybe like 10 or 12 mil, just so you have more room to work with, because this stuff gets pretty tight when it's wrapped up. What if they're all bots and I'm talking to myself? I don't think I'm popular enough to have bots. Plus they'd be shilling stuff, like trying to sell 3080s. I have a few different Krytox lubes, greases available at work. Do you know which ones would be a good lube for rails? You don't want the super viscous stuff. I think, what do I use? I think it's NLGI1. It's whatever like the lowest grade of like thickness of the grease is. It's rails on a 3D printer. Pretty much any grease will work. Try to avoid anything with graphite or anything in it that would be abrasive. But basically, I just go with generic white lithium and I have no issues. Thicker stuff I find does tend to last a little bit longer, but it does cause a little bit more friction because it's thicker. So, but again, I've used, I've used, what is this, the Super Lube PTFE base grease before. I've used, I don't have it anymore, I've used oil base, I've used, I'm using white lithium right now, but pretty much any grease will work, as long as it's not like super thick and it's not the stuff that can wear down your rails. Okay, so now we gotta flip this, so I'm gonna need good old filament boxes. Well, NLG1 I think is like a grade of grease. It's not like maybe that grease itself is that expensive, but I think that's just a grade of grease. You don't have to go like that one brand NLG1 might be expensive, but another brand might be dirt cheap. I think there is a grease listed on the sourcing guide, and I think that's like the official grease that Highwind recommends, but I'm not using Highwind. Okay, so I gotta. Where were we? So we had the Skr attached, but I just took it off for a minute. So we have to mount the SSR, which I don't know where I put it. Oh, here it is. So we have our little solid state relay. And this thing doesn't focus. It's a little Krytom solid state relay. And it mounts to the side of our power supply now. Last week I didn't have a bracket, so this week I printed the bracket. And this is why flex plates are awesome. Done. Always that little one piece that doesn't come off. I also printed the skirts because I forgot to print the skirts. So now I have all the skirts. But yeah, so we have this little bracket. It's really simple. I think I spent like 2 minutes in Fusion 360 designing it. But all it does is a little screw on your power supply that it just clips into or screws into, and it just holds your SSR in the right location. Actually, it goes that way, like that. And I think it just uses a generic M3 screw. Yeah, it does. I know I have one somewhere. Yeah, I was against flex plates for a while because I was all, oh, my plate will be the flattest thing, and flex plate adds too much chance of it not being perfectly flat, and yada yada. I was always fine with, you know, hacking parts off using my spatula and just chiseling off everything. And then you get a flex plate one day, and then you just go pop, and everything pops off. Yeah, I'm never not running a flex plate on a printer ever again. And I run, that's the cheap energetic one. Because I live in Canada, I can't get Wham Bam or Ultra Stick or any of the other fancy ones. Okay, so I gotta remount this guy there. Yeah, the convenience of the flex plate itself will make up for any minor deficiencies it causes. Like simply for the fact that you can print, you know, a full plate of items and you don't have to worry about, you know, damaging anything, trying to hack them off, or you just take the plate off and, you know, flex it and everything comes flying off. So I'm going to run this, the SKR, it's Mini E3 V2. This is the recommended board. You can run a V1. The SKR Mini E3 1.2, which this actually did have in before. This is now a new board. It just has an issue with the thermistor, where it doesn't read proper temperatures. Or it does read proper temperatures, but it varies, it spikes. I don't think I have it up here. Let me find it. I think this is it. So if you're using an SKR Mini E3 V1.2, you may see an issue like this, where your temperature is it's basically bouncing up and down, and you can see it there. Once you get above a certain temperature, it does that, and mine did that as well. I just kind of ignored it. But basically what that is it's an issue with the way the circuit is made with a resistor or something. I'm not a big, you know, tech guy when it comes to PCBs and whatnot. But that issue is corrected on the V2, so we do recommend the V2. Plus the V2 has some other added things that make it a little bit better. But you can fix it. I think, let me find it here. Yeah, you can fix it here by bridging something. If you go to this page, and you can do this on any, with any soldering iron if you're good enough. You can do this at home, fix. Brack Show actually pioneered this, I think. But anyways, this is all fixed on the new one anyway, so it's a non-issue. So just get a V2 if you're buying a V2. Actually, let me, as we're following the manual, let me pull up the manual for wiring. So I will be trying to wire this according to the manual. If the manual has wiring in it. Yeah, it does. Okay. So this is how you wire up. So one thing I will mention, I am not using a buck converter or a separate power supply for the SKR because I am wiring the SKR and I'm running a Mini or a Zero, a Raspberry Pi Zero, to the SKR, and that's powering the Pi Zero. So I don't need a separate DC converter here, like it's in the design, because my Raspberry Pi is going to be powered directly off of the TFT inputs on the SKR Mini E3. So we're going to be able to skip that. Okay. And then also, and this worked on the 1.2, so I'm going to keep it on this guy. With the small NEMA 14 motors and the amount of current we're running through them, you pretty much don't need active cooling on your controller board. So I still recommend installing the heat sinks, but just for if you do have like a little bit of cross flow air, it'll kind of help a little bit. But you don't need active cooling on this controller board. So make sure you install your heat sinks. Now it does come with a bunch of jumpers, however I don't believe you need to install them. Yeah, I don't think you need to install any of the jumpers for this guy. Let me double check, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you need to install any jumpers. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing we're going to hook up is we're going to go through and install our SSR first. Or actually, no, I'm going to install my power. So for this guy, I am using the, I don't know, I got these off Amazon. They're the all-in-one C14 IEECC whatever spec. So I'm going to mount this guy right about there. I had it mounted differently, so I got to spin it around. Yeah, it'll still work. So Chris, if you have the 1.2, it'll still work. It's not like it won't work. It'll still work. You just might have to play around with your. You might have to do a little bit of soldering if you want to not have the issue or live with the issue. It's either or type thing. Like mine ran with the issue. The only difference will be you won't have the greatest thermals because your temperatures will bounce around. I want to have that goes down. Yeah, I got it. Hopefully this is long enough. I might have to rewire this. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewire this, I think. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to rewire that. I'm gonna need a longer wire. Joys of electrical. Yeah, some of them were worse than others, apparently. I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember seeing mine that bad. It has to do with the way, it depends, I think it depends on what version of RepRap firmware you're running as well. But from what I remember, it has to do with the fact that with Clipper, when it does a temperature call, like when it's like, tell me what temperature the hot end is, it demands to know what it is that exact second. Whereas with like Marlin, it kind of averages it out. So with Marlin, it kind of hides the defect. So people who are running Marlin on that board, with that board, don't see the issue because it's hiding it. However, those running Clipper, which is, you know, wants to know the temperature right now, see the issue because it has something to do with like the resistor, like doesn't read it right or bounces it around or like the resistance. I don't know. I'm not a circuit guy. Long story short, it just reads it instantly, and because of the way the circuit is wired up, it displays it instantly wrong. So. Yeah, the issue is a non-issue with the V2. They fixed it in the V2. So it's only an issue if you're running the V1 boards. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have to add some M3 nuts in here to put this guy in. So as for wiring, I mentioned this last week, so I'll bring it up again. If you're building one of these from scratch right now, I recommend that you actually don't get a power supply setup like I have here. I'm going to recommend that you go with the use the external power brick. It's a 160 watt power brick. It's the same power brick that the Prusa uses for the Prusa Mini. These are too long, I think it's 6. And the reason for that is you can run all 24 volt, so you remove the need of an SSR. You have no high voltage in your printer itself. So you have the power brick, you run the high voltage, is only in the brick, right? So your printer itself is all 24 volt. Use a 24 volt heater mat. You use the V2. Now another reason to get the V2 over the V1.2 is V2 has a beefier MOSFET for the bed. Now it's only going to be a 60 watt heater for your bed anyway, so it'll be fine. It is a little bit more pricey, but you save on having to get an SSR, and you also can avoid the DC to DC converter by powering a Pi Mini off of the SKR. So you make it a much simpler build. And also, again, no high voltage to play with. It's only 24 volts, which, you know, if you accidentally touch that, it'll hurt a little bit, but it won't do as much damage than mains. So if you're a little safety conscious, you can do that. So it does simplify your build quite a bit if you go that route. Yeah, the brick, it's a Meanwell brick, I believe. It is legit the same item they use for the Prusa Mini. It's the same power supply. Dang it. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we got one nut in there. I am running out of M3 nuts again. Oh wait, no, I got a whole box of them here. Two nuts. Oh, that's why that didn't go in. That's not an M3 nut. Don't get your M2.5s and your M3 nuts mixed up, kids. They don't work. Yeah, there you go. Raymond just linked it. So if you go with that route, it does simplify the build quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's required, but if I were to build another one of these right now from scratch, that's personally what I would go. I would go with the power brick. But since you know, I purchased all these items to build this thing before all that was, you know, kind of a thing, this is how mine is. Yeah, right, you gotta remember, it is a very small bed. Like, I have a mains powered 100-watt bed, and I PWM that thing down pretty much half. Like, I can heat my bed up to ABS temps in like a minute if I really wanted to, but it's overkill. It's a massive overkill. During the good old testing days, like 2 years ago, I did have a 60-watt 12-volt bed, and that still got to ABS temperatures within 5 minutes, which that's perfectly reasonable. Chris Henkel, $5. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the stream. As always, because you're the first one to donate tonight, I'll say it like I always do. If anyone does donate to the stream, all funds pretty much get poured right back into the stream, either equipment for the stream, such as the cam link that you're watching this on right now, or just other items, for building printers. So, thank you, man. Greatly appreciate it. Yeah, I think, having massive beds at, everyone with their 500, 600 watt V2 beds is, you kind of get numb to the fact that you really don't need that much power. Like, if I remember correctly, I think it's 0.4 watts per centimeter square is what you really need to efficiently heat a bed. And that's what I PWM all my beds to that. I do the math. Because especially with, the aluminum beds we're all using, if you overheat your bed too quickly, so if you run, a 1,000 watt heater maxed out, and you crank your bed to, whatever temperature you're shooting right away, over time that rapid thermal cycling will actually stress the bed and cause it to warp, and you don't want that. Okay. So, let's see here. Okay, so we got our live, we got our neutral, we got our ground hooked up. Actually, I'm going to shorten that. I don't like how long that is. Yes, I'm going on to appearances and wiring. Yeah, and remember too, it's not so much about the bed as your whole printer itself, right? Especially in closed printers. This is why we recommend, unlike the V2s and V1s you see, we always mention that 10-minute heat soak. And the reason for that is it's not getting the bed to temperature is the reason for the heat soak. Yeah, it does help, even out the temperature of the bed. But after, once your mat registers print temperature, within a minute or two, this top surface will be at print temperature as well, usually, unless you have a 1-inch thick bed. But it's to let the whole printer itself kind of equalize, because the extrusions underneath the bed will start to grow and flex a bit under the temperature, and you basically want everything to kind of get to its neutral point before you start printing. Because, metal expands when it gets warm. So if your whole printer is enclosed, this whole thing is enclosed, and I have 50 degrees Celsius ambient air temperatures in here. When these extrusions are 20 degrees Celsius, or 15 degrees in my basement here on a winter morning, if I hit start print, by the time I finish that first layer, this whole thing could have grown a few thousandths of an inch, which, can kind of screw up your first layer. Technically, this is all, based on math. And you'll probably never see that much, but it is a thing that happens. So by letting that 10-minute heat soak, you let everything kind of come up to temperature, so that when you do go to print, everything's at its neutral, balanced state. So that's why we do recommend the 10-minute heat soak, even on the small printers. electrical today after welding. If I had a TIG welder, I could show you how to TIG weld a little bit. But before we go any further, the first thing I always do is, one, I lose my extension cord. Nope, that's not it. Off. Is it possible to mount a Hemera on a Vzero? No. Officially, no Voron supports the Hemera extruder. Most of the Voron crew isn't super impressed with it. If people want, I can kind of go into why I'm not a huge fan of the extruder, but basically no Voron supports it. The afterburner pretty much accomplishes the same thing without using a proprietary design. And then Hemera's fat, it's wide. So if you mount it to any of the Vorons, you're going to lose Y print space right off the bat. You might have to lose X as well, because you're going to have to put the shroud, which it doesn't come with a print shroud or a part fan. So you're going to have to put a part fan on it, which you might lose X direction as well. It's I don't like it. Okay, so I just have the power supply wired up. Hopefully we don't get a spark. Yay, we got a green light. Little green light. So, multimeter. You don't need a super expensive one. If you got a Fluke, don't be afraid to use it. A Fluke's a really good one. But I just got, a generic one from the generic hardware store. Don't measure these ones that have the wires going in for mains. You will get a sparky spark, as we learned last time when we covered in last class. So you're just measuring your voltage. So you have two hookups. You got on the LRS 100, you have two negatives, two positives, basically. So red on the positive, black on the negative. Oops, I got on the wrong one, I think. Yeah, there we go. I remember right setting. There we go. Okay. So we're actually running about 25 volts on this guy. Yeah, so 25 volts on this power supply. So what you can do is, on all the Meanwhile power supplies, there's a little potentiometer. I know it's going to be hard to see, but it's right beside the light. Okay? And put your meter in and grab a screwdriver. And by turning that potentiometer, you can adjust your voltage. So if you turn it to the left, it drops your voltage. You turn it to the right, it raises it. I think you can adjust it from whatever the target is, plus minus 1 or 2 volts. So if it's a 24 volt power supply, you might be able to go up to 26. You might be able to drop it down to 20. I know some people are like, yeah, Raymond, 25 is fine, and odds are none of your components will fry if your volts are too high. I'm just kind of going over it here. So I have it set for 24.2. That's good enough. Turn off. And just be aware, your power supply does have capacitors in it. So in case you don't notice, the light is still on. So there still is voltage in there. Technically, it does dissipate relatively quickly. But don't immediately unplug a power supply or turn off your printer and then immediately touch something that shouldn't be touched with power in it, because there might still be power in it for a little bit. Okay. So we have our power supply in. Now we are going to hook up our solid state relay, which that's what an SSR stands for, is solid state relay. And what it does is, you have, for those who don't know how an SSR works, you have a low voltage and a high voltage side. Here, let me grab a bigger one just to explain. I know I have some somewhere. are you? There's one. So, solid state relays. So this is a really small one here. I believe this one is rated for 3 to 15 volts control. And I can't see the other thing because it's covered under the bracket, but it's within reason. So how an SSR works is you have your control voltage and you have your, basically your mains voltage, and that's what it's, this voltage controls this turning off and on, basically. So this one here, you need a control voltage that's between 3 and 32 volts. So if you fed at 12 volts, it'd be fine. If you fed at 24 volts, it'd be fine. If you set it at 5 volts, it would be fine. And what that does is this plugs into 2 pins on your motherboard, and this is what your motherboard tells how your bed works, right? So it'll basically turn on and off the circuit. And what it does is you feed your mains in, and it basically turns off and on based on the control voltage when that tells it to turn. So you use a low voltage direct current to operate a high voltage alternating current circuit, essentially. So these are the big ones that you see in, the V1, the V2. This is a little itty bitty one that we use for this guy. So when you're wiring one up, your bed has 2 wires coming from it. There is no positive and negative with the wire. Heater cartridges are simply resistors for the most part. So it doesn't really matter which way you feed the voltage in, as long as it goes in and goes out. So we're going to have to put a spade connector on here. I know I keep putting this one away. I know I'm going to need it. And this one goes to the top. There we go. And then I'll, of course, have these all clamped down and everything. Actually, that one doesn't stick too well. You know what? I don't like this. Let me see here if I have smaller ones. I think I do. Now these use smaller prongs, so you might have to use a different style of cover here to crimp on. Take this off. You know your crimp's good if you gotta struggle to rip it off. I'll just cut it. I love when the fiberglass insulation actually strips clean for once. Now, I know last week I was saying I was going to try and get the wiring done and then move on to doing mainsail tonight. I don't think that'll happen. We'll probably just for the amount of time we have. So what I'm thinking is this week I actually have Monday and Tuesday off work. And for those who know, the reason I stream on Saturday nights is I work steady afternoons. But I had to use up some vacation time. So on probably Monday night, I'm thinking I might do a dedicated mainsail stream. There we go. For setting up mainsail. So that way tomorrow I can actually do it all and make sure I have it all correct. Because one, I want to make sure I'm actually doing it right when I show you guys how to do it, because I haven't actually installed mainsail on any of my printers before. And then I can go over it on Monday and actually do it all properly and whatnot. So, for your bed, you're going to have the connection go from the positive, or the hot, or the live wire, through the SSR to the bed. Oh wait, no, what am I thinking? I'm talking backwards. Yeah, no. So you need another wire that goes from live to the SSR to the bed, and then the other wire just goes straight to your neutral. So we need another spade. I don't know if I saved the other wire, if I gotta make a new one. This guy would just go in there, and it's okay to have two prongs stacked on top of each other. Whenever you have to stack two prongs on top of each other, just have them opposite ways so that they can get close to each other essentially. Try to avoid the bending of them as much as possible. Let me see if I saved my other wire. Oh, I did. So, again, this is a rebuild. I tore this guy apart, so I saved crimps on things that I could. And this is the other end. So then this end plugs into the other side of the SSR. I might actually have to take this off to get in there, just so I have room to work on it. Yeah, let me take this out. No use trying to, might accidentally break it. Yeah, you would have a thermal disconnect also wired in there as well. I don't, but you should have a thermal disconnect wired in there. Okay. There we go. So you got voltage going in and then out to the bed, and then from the bed to the neutral. And then these right here, the two side-by-side ones are your control. So that plugs into your controller board. I know, it's kind of, I wish I had a direct overhead camera for this. There we go. Give everything a little bit of a tug just to make sure, you know, nothing got loose or anything. And there we go. So our bed's wired up. Going back to the manual here. So again, if you get lost, always reference the manual. So we got our live neutral ground going in. And then we got our power lines going to the SKR to power the SKR. We got our live going to the SSR, to the bed, and then our neutral coming back there. Now on my board, again, I don't need the power of the Raspberry Pi off of buck because I'm powering up for the SKR, so you can ignore that. So now we're moving on to wiring the SKR. So the first thing we're going to do is power. Which I hope I saved those wires too, or I might have to make some power wires. No, it looks like I saved them. So for the SKR, it is only running off 24 volts, so I use 20 gauge wires to it, I believe. Yeah. Because you really only need 20 gauge wires. So we got our positive voltage and our negative voltage. And then whenever you got to put wires into a I can't remember what these type of connectors are called. You want to have them. You want to have a crimp on them. You want to have a ferrule, I think it's called, style crimp. You don't want just bare wires because they can fray. You can accidentally short stuff out easily. So you want to crimp on a ferrule. It just makes it look better. And then also, like, you can get ferrule kits with all the different sizes and a crimper for like 10 or 15 bucks on Amazon. I think I paid like 15 or 20 bucks Canadian for one of these. You don't have to get the super fancy ones. You just need a basic one. Yeah, ferrules. Okay, and when you're plugging these in, you do want to make sure that you are positive goes into positive, negative goes into negative, and all that. Because on the SKR, it says it on the bottom, not on the top. Or actually, okay, on the V2 it says it on the bottom. On the 1.2 it says it on the top. But I'm assuming they're both the same. Yeah. Yeah. So just look at the wiring diagram, reference your board, make sure you're not mixing up your voltages. That's an easy way to smoke a board out. Now luckily, the SKR Mini E3 has it has a fuse on it, replaceable fuse. So if you do let the blue smoke out, you can replace it, and hopefully you don't actually fry the whole board. So again, come to another point where I like to check everything. So what I do is once the controller is in, I plug it in. Now you have to be careful at this point because you have no control on your SSR. So if you've plugged it in or whatever, there's no firmware or anything. So sometimes they can just start turning on. So be aware your bed might start to get warm. But we're just turning it on for a second here, just to make sure we got power going to the board. So, negative, negative, negative. Okay, status power. We got red light. We're good. No burning smell. Okay, we can unplug that. Okay. So, looking at here, we have the board powered now. So now we're just going to go through and start hooking everything up. So based on this one, we already have the SSR. So we're going to plug that into, it looks like it uses the PDAT. Okay, so this one's actually a little bit different. So the V1.2 has different, or the V2 has different headouts here. So what do we use for the control on the V2? I'll have to look into that. I have PowerDet. I think it uses PowerDet. Because let me see here. If you're looking here, we have pdet, and that's what we're using to run our SSR. Yeah, so pdet is 12 volt ground, so it's PC12. Where's the Skr Mini V2? Hardware, V2, 3D maybe? Where's my pinout? That's not what I want. Where's the pinout? It's that plug. Yeah, I think it's just called power, because it's not pdet on the V2. I'm trying to find the V2. Where's the V2 pinout? I don't know. Oh, it's probably on their main page. Gulf Coast Robotics, BIQ. Where's BIQ? I had this all opened up earlier. There we go. Yeah, power det. Yeah, it doesn't show it, but yeah, it's power det. So into power det it goes. I'm assuming it's still the same 2, because I believe that hasn't changed. So it'd be the 2 on the left. So I gotta adjust these pins, because on the V1 it was different. Because on the V1 I had mine hooked up to like servo. I was using the servo pins, I believe. So I need to adjust this. Because again, I think, as always, I'm using stuff that's way before we decide a standard. So I think I had mine set up for using the servo. So I'm going to swap these pins around. Oh yeah, and if you're trying to ping me on Discord, I can't see because I don't get notifications. There we go. Okay, there it is. Yeah, Discord goes into stream mode when I'm streaming, so I don't get any notifications on it. Yeah, so... Oop, wrong one. Yeah, see, so it's power det. So that, I think, is used for, like, power zoom or whatever, so it's still PC12. So PC12 and ground are the 2 control voltage. 1. So, it's still the same ones. So, we're good there. Bring everything back up. There we go. Okay. Wish I knew where my tweezers went. They're probably buried under something right now. There we go. Okay, so we got the positive is, I'm pretty sure I got mine, there we go. Is that side. Negative is that one. And pdet is in. So that is SSR control done. We got our thermistors here. And this is for bed temperature. I'm gonna have to re-crimp that. So I need to find my JST connectors. So this is one thing I will say, I'm not a super huge fan of the Skr series for these. I know why they use them, but I'm not a super huge fan of JST connectors. I think they're a very weak connection. Like, they're functionally fine, they do work, but having to crimp them on kind of sucks because they're a pretty small connector, and they don't have the lifespan. They don't, you know. I find they're too fragile. I prefer like what Duet uses, which is the Molex KK, as my connector of choice. Like, these are a step up from like DuPont connector style, but I much prefer Molex KK. Now, if you really want, if you hate these things that bad, you can desolder every header off your SKR and solder on a Molex KK connection. I've actually seen people do that because I'm not a huge fan of JST. I've been tempted to do it, but I don't have that much free time. So thermistors are like your heater cartridges. There is no positive or negative. It's just you hook it up. And on the SKR, you have a THB and TH0, or THO. So one's bed and one's hot end. So the one THB is your bed, obviously. And there we go. So now we have this giant mass of wires, and I really wish I had a better camera angle for this. Move this out a bit. I know this is kind of a crappy thing here. Let me make some room. Let me turn this around. I want you guys to be able to see what I'm actually working on here. That's a little bit better. Still not perfect. Desoldering, replacing them seems like more work than dealing with the pain. If you have a lot of free time and you're waiting on Molex or JST connectors to come in, and you already have a bunch of Molex KKs, I can make an argument for doing that because at least you can get it done in a night. Yeah, they are a weak connector. Like they do fail, and I don't like that. Okay, so you know, have a giant mass of wires, and unfortunately we can't just take this spaghetti and go and it's done. We're gonna have to hook everything up. So what I do is when I'm wiring, I tend to work from closest to source and out to allow me to cable manage along the way. So what we will do is we will do our bed thermistors. So that's going to be a pain. So bed thermistor will go there. I hate fiberglass. I hate these fiberglass sleeves. They never want to strip cleanly. And unfortunately, it's a thermistor, so you really want to make sure you got a good connection, otherwise your temperature is going to be bouncing all over the place. Damn it. So what I find is try stripping it by hand, and then you go in with the little Nipex and you just kind of clean it up. And then your hands are going to be itchy for the rest of the day because you got fiberglass in them. And try not to cut the wire, of course. Good enough. And then my crimper of choice, as always, Engineer PA09. Keep forgetting I gotta always fix the colors on this camera. There we go. Hey, look, actual color depth. Yeah, like if you got meaty hands, holding these guys, get them all lined up in the crimper and whatnot are a pain. And it's very, you don't need to strip a lot of wire with these guys. Like the actual amount of wire that can be inserted into the female JSD connection is quite minimal. Like it's only like, you know, not even a millimeter, I think. It's not much. Well, it's more than a mil, but like this is too much. I know it's hard to see, but that's like too much wire there, pretty much. Yeah, that's too much. If you have too much wire, just trim it. There we go. Make sure it's nice and tight. I ended up soldering PTFE wire extensions to those thermistor wires, so yes, that can be an advantage there. For those that don't know, don't ever actually solder on your connector. If you solder on your connector, solder itself, when it thermal cycles, will shrink and expand and contract, and eventually can actually work itself out. So like you'll see on some really bad tutorial videos, you'll see people soldering on connectors onto their wires. Don't ever do that. The crimp alone is all you need to hold it in place. If your crimp isn't strong enough to hold the wire or to hold the connector onto the wire, redo the crimp. Don't solder the wire on. Okay, so this is my Y end stop. So all my end stops already had connectors on them because I'm reusing them, so I'm just plugging them back in. Z end stop. Where's my X end stop? For some reason that has a lot of extra wire now. Motors, A motor, B motor. We got our Z motor and E. So how is this hooked up? So A, B, Z, E. A, Now on the V2 board, it has two Z hookups. I don't think it matters, so I'm just going to put in ZA. And then extruder. And there we go. And what else do we have here now? So, we have our hot end fan, our part fan, and then the actual heater cartridge itself left. So as you can see, I left way too much extra wire. But hey, I don't have short wire. So what I'm going to do is actually unplug this guy, because this guy's going to run on top after, just for appearances. These guys are going to have to go through there. And I'll take some time to cable management this guy up a bit so it doesn't look as gnarly as it does right now, because right now this is pretty gnarly looking, because the cable path is a little bit different now than what it was originally on the original build. So we're going to our up. There we go, a little bit more. We're going over here, and this is where we're going to hook the heater cartridges up. So we're going to need some ferrules. I think I use the small gray ones. And I dropped a bunch of them. That's all good. There we go. Now I have red and black wires here, simply because the 20 gauge wire I can't use comes like pre-paired up. But again, it's a heater, so there is no positive, there is no negative. So you don't need to worry about polarity with those. Yeah, ferrules are super handy because they just keep everything clean. You never have to worry about, you know, an errant wire accidentally shorting something out. It makes everything look good. It gives you a more solid connection too when you attach them in these little clamp connector things, because you're actually squeezing against something and not just a mass of wires that can eventually kind of work itself loose. It's also, you never tin the wires before you clamp them into something. So I've seen videos as well where these kind of clamp block connectors here, people pre-tin the wires before putting them in there for some reason. Never do that, because especially these connectors with heater cartridges, as the wires heat up and cool down, eventually the solder will contract and basically it's soft, and before you know it, what you thought was a tight connection is no longer a tight connection and your wire's coming out. And then you got a short, and then you got a fire, and then you don't have a house. Okay, then we got our fans here. So actually, I'm going to shorten this one here, because this is, I don't know how this one ended up so much longer than it is, but. Now, another good thing, with the V2, we have two CNC fans, and then we also still have the bed heater, the bed, or the hot end. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I put them into the wrong one. So you have the two blocks here are for power, and then you have the next big block is actually for your bed, and then the not mini size, but the smaller block is for your hot end. Because usually on most printers, your hot end is smaller than the bed, and in this one it is too. Like I don't recommend using 50-watt heaters in these guys, especially for the Vzero, simply because you only have a 100-watt power supply plus your motors and everything. So half your power supply being taken up by the heater itself is kind of not great. You want a little bit of overhead just in case. There we go. So anyway, so what we used to do on the V2, on the V1.2, sorry, if you take a look here, you have what would normally be your bed would be controlling your print cooling fan, and then on the one CNC fan, you would have your hot end fan. Now that we have two CNC fans on the V2, you can have your part fan, your hot end fan, and now your bed's free now. You actually can run your bed off of a DC voltage. Or you can, instead of having your SSR be controlled by the PDET hookup, you can actually just run it off your bed. Like on my V2s, my bed is still running the SSR even though it's meant to run a DC bed. Those are the pins I use for controlling it. Okay, so I can't remember which one is which. I think red black is my hot end fan. Or this pair is my hot end fan. I'll find out. You can swap them easily. Wire thermistors made with such flimsy wiring because it's cheap and there's no real voltage in them. So you don't need thicker wire, and when you don't need thicker wire, you don't use thicker wire because it's cheap. That's also why they usually have that pretty tough coating on them. I don't have any in here. I have some in my toolbox at work, but you should see like the thermistor wiring. They're not thermistors, they're thermocouples. But the wiring they use for those is the same thing. It's really thin wire with a really crappy coating on it. And that's for injection mold manifolds, so high-end item. They still use kind of crappy wires with a crappy coating. Yeah, every time I get these lined up in the jaws, I always take a chunk out of my thumb. Okay, so I think positive is on that side. Yep. So fan 0. And now we gotta do fan 1. Yeah, I know, these wiring streams are always the boring ones, unfortunately. Luckily, I don't have to wire the whole thing this time. This is only the, only about half of it. Don't have to cut and crimp a million wires just for motors. I have so much extra there. I may actually do that off screen, off camera, just to clean up the look of that. Or I just bundle them up. Because I originally had a lot more wires running across the back of this guy, because of the wire routing on the original revision of when I had this built. So now that I've kind of removed a bunch of components and redone some things, I actually have a lot more free space in this build. So that kind of is a good thing. Except for wires. Go. And we're going to shorten this guy here because that's way too long. So here's the thing, this guy will be done soon, hopefully. I got just to finish up the wiring on this today. And a stream on setting up mainsail and getting it, you know, getting it ready to print. Then maybe one more stream on actually, like, you know, first print settings, what you should be looking for when it's doing your first print, that sort of thing. And then after that, I don't have another build in the pipeline because I already did the V2. I don't have a V1. V0. I'm not going to take apart my switch wire to do a build guide on the switch wire, simply for the fact that the switch wire is so simple. It would literally take me more time to tear it apart and just redo wiring than to just do the build itself. The build is like an afternoon. The hardware assembly of it. It's not a hard build at all. So I can do like a show and tell help on it, but I'm not going to tear one apart for a stream just to rebuild it. So I need some ideas on what else I should stream. I don't know where the other wire went. Oh, well, just using the connector. Like, what would you guys like to see me kind of go over? I do want to do, I know there's the whole, and I've said it a million times, the intro to ABS, how to print ABS for dummies video guide, and I do plan on trying to get that done at some point. But in the meantime, because that'll probably just be an actual YouTube video, not a stream. So what would you guys like to see? There we go. Okay. Yeah, I could put together the junk part printer. The thing is, though, I kind of want to go through and redesign it. Kind of use it as an excuse to teach myself Fusion 360, although Fusion 360 now, why you guys do that with the licensing? Now it's like all neutered, and I kind of don't want to spend the time to learn Fusion 360 if it's all going to change. Why you do this? Why? Yeah, sure, take away the CNC part of it. I don't exactly have a CNC at home, so it's not a big deal. But neutering the cam or the CAD portion of it quite a bit is kind of shitty. Okay. So I could always, work on that guy, but it's kind of ABS for dummies. Do it with an ender. I don't have an ender, and they're like $300 Canadian. So no ender for me. So I'm not. It's kind of If anything, I'll do it on the switch wire, because this thing is the closest to like a stock printer that, you know, most people kind of have. Because yeah, it's Core XZ and it's all fancy and stuff, but it's still, you know, a DC bed. It's a bed flinger, so it's still a pretty standard printer. So okay, so now it's all wired up. The only thing we still have to wire up is our the Pi Zero. So before I do that, though, I'm going to do a little bit of cable management to kind of wrangle in this rat's nest a bit. So that'll go there, and that'll kind of all just get zip tied down with a crap ton of zip ties. So we'll get our old pal out, spiral sleeve. What hot end? The switch wire is actually running a V6. So it's running a Triangle Labs V6 with the titanium heat break in it, a 50 watt FISAC heater, and some random generic thermistor in it. Nothing super fancy. And the reason I'm running that is because my V0 is set, or my switch wire is set up for dual extrusion, and by having the Bowden tube there, it kind of makes it a little bit easier for the filament to feed back in during swapping between the filaments, because it's more open. There's less because it's crappier, it's better essentially, because the tolerances are more forgiving. So when it tries to feed back in a chunk of filament that's been retracted out, it's less likely to jam. Okay, that's why I had all that sleeving, because that went like that. And my zip ties. Zip ties. Nozzle is just it's a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, and it is the Triangle Labs copper nozzle with the nickel plating. I think it's nickel plating. It's their plated copper nozzle. And I actually run that nozzle on all my printers because it's a pretty damn good nozzle. Unless you are printing abrasives, it is personally my recommended nozzle. Let's see here. This is totally a tangent, but let's take this out. So this printer has been printing for a good 1,000+ hours without any maintenance at all. Okay, no maintenance. So this is how it is. Oh, actually, shoot, I gotta turn on. Let me take the filament out first. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the hot end out. I'm gonna show you what the nozzle looks like. So I want to show you on how a copper-plated nozzle, or a copper, plate, or a plated, copper nozzle. So it's a copper nozzle with a plating, not a nozzle with a copper plating. How it looks after it's been printing for thousands of hours, just by itself. I don't use a nozzle brush. I don't do anything on this thing. So I just want to show you what it looks like. Video about the essentially useful, awesome Voron user mods. I don't run any mods on any of my Vorons, unfortunately. I pretty much run them all stock. Because for mods, I'm one of those, if I run into an issue, then I look for a mod, and being on the dev team, kind of, my issues are taken care of in release. But I could do like go through and just kind of feature stuff people have worked on. I've seen a lot of Gucci mods with like lighting and like other features that I personally don't use, but would make, like, you know, just make your printer look awesome. So I'll probably go through and maybe feature a few of those, do a video on that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to put a clip over that. Okay, there we go. Extrusion, retract, pull it up. I think you jam up. I have to figure it out first. Yeah. Okay. I gotta let that cool off. the nozzle off. Let that cool off. Prusa MMU. It's dual extrusion is still kind of wonky. That's why I do the switch wire I built as my dual extrusion. I don't even have a dual extrusion print down here. Oh, I got the. As always, this is the only one I got down here. The little Charmander. So yeah, it does work, but it's still wonky. There still is no perfect way of doing it. See, the switch wire can't be a mod because it was built before public release, so there is no mods on it. It uses all official parts. It's more of a beta than anything. Okay, I'm gonna let that drop down a bit because I don't want to burn myself taking that out. Oh, I really gotta fix the ducts. So you will see, by the way, why we changed the duct design on the V2s. Not that it matters because I run ABS and I barely run a fan anyways. Okay, so now I gotta kind of clean this up. So we're just doing cable management right now. I know I have some big zip ties. I just don't want any of the wires hanging down too far and touching the ground, basically. Actually, that one is going to run under. No, that's fine there. That's fine. How much better is a Voron over a Prusa Mark III's? Sorry for the dumb question, but I'm new to this. So, in terms of print quality, I will always answer print quality questions by basically saying you can't use print quality to judge printers for about 80% of the time. Now, obviously, if I pull out a printer that uses, lopsided V wheels and a hot end that with the nozzle that is made by some, guy in China with a drilling it by hand, it's not going to print good, no matter what you do. Any well-built printer will print good as long as you take the time to tune it and you have your profile and settings correct, okay? So print quality is pretty much hasn't been a comparison factor, in my opinion, for the past several years. Now, some printers might have better ducting, so they can print overhangs a little bit better, or be able to print certain high temperature materials better because they have higher temp capable processes or components. But if you're just printing a PLA benchy, if you take the time to tune your printer, pretty much every printer can put out a good benchy nowadays, okay, as long as you don't have a mechanical issue. So, is a Prusa and a Voron, which one's better? If the print is the same, what other things will make it better? Now, this guy's running Clipper. Clipper is a firmware that a lot of people think has a better motion planner than Marlin. So you'll be able to do certain things. There will be a little bit better curves, radiuses, that sort of thing. This thing is Core XZ. With Core XZ, you are getting basically your Z speed, your Z speed, is the same as your XY speed. So you're able to do Z hops amazingly quick. And when you can do Z hops amazingly quick, you're going to run Z hop all the time. You're not going to have your nozzle dragging across prints, and you're going to save a lot of print time. So it is a faster printer, I will say, because again, 32-bit Clipper versus 8-bit Marlin on a Prusa Mark III. So it is a faster printer, and it's running a firmware that should be a little bit better. Now, you can always run Clipper on the MKS3, and there takes that out of the argument. It's also cheaper, and it has a better build volume, and it's also designed to be fully enclosed, whereas the, you got to go buy an IKEA Lax, which is some cardboard to put over your printer. The switch wire is designed to literally Now mine you can't because I have, you know, 2 extruders sitting on top of it. But if you're running the direct drive version, and if you look on the website, you can see the pictures of it. You literally can just strap panels to all the sides of it and a door in the front with some brackets and enclose the whole printer on its designed print volume. Norman, Slice has a liquid cooled hot end. Liquid cooled hot ends have kind of been a thing for a while. This is where my hot end is, so this is upside down obviously, but this is where my hot end is, and it has water. And this is high voltage electrical below it. Water, high voltage. Now obviously this is upside down. So you want water near your high voltage electricals if it leaks. Now, are you printing peak? Because unless you're printing peak, this guy's fully enclosed and I can print ABS and I've printed nylon with it, and I haven't had heat creep issues with just the stock air fan. So it seems very overkill, water cooling a hot end, unless you're doing super high-end application, which Slice does kind of aim for that market, so good on them, but it's kind of like overkill for your home hobbyist. Okay. So, I dropped a screw. So I'm going to take my hot end out here because I want to show you why I like these copper nozzles. I think I actually got to do the bottom one here. The bottom one that lets it swing out? Yeah. That. And for those that have never seen a nozzle change on a Voron, this is how easy it is. So I unscrewed the 2 for the fan, and then there's 2 screws that hold the your heater or the hot end assembly itself in. You undo those. You undo your power and your thermistor connector, and then boom. That's how easy you take out the whole hot end assembly. So, yes, my ducts are melted because these are beta ducts and they're not in the right material. And we've changed the design since then, so they're not as close. And I'm running a mosquito, which puts out more heat sideways, so my ducts are melted. So ignore the ducts, but take a look at the nozzle. This is after a few thousand hours. It's going to be hard to see. Let me see if I can get it. It's better on this camera. Probably not. It's gonna be bad for lighting. But focus on the nozzle. Come on, you got this. Basically, there's like a little bit of black on the nozzle, but in terms of like buildup, there's none. There's a little bit of burn, you know, toasty bits, but there's no buildup on the nozzle itself, and that's from a few thousand hours of use. Now, yeah, I run the silicone sock, and by the way, if you go way back, I did a video on how to make a homebrew silicone sock, and guess what? It's still holding up. It hasn't melted, it hasn't fallen apart. So, yeah. I really like these plated copper nozzles. So, unless you are printing hardened materials, I say go with that as your nozzle. And if you are never going to print hardened materials, you do not need a hardened nozzle, or abrasive material, sorry. If you're never going to print abrasive materials, you do not need a hardened nozzle. You want a nozzle that will put out as much, or have as much thermal transfer as possible. So you're going to want a copper nozzle or a brass nozzle. Anything that's like a metal or a steel is going to transfer less heat, which is going to be worse for print quality. So you want the copper or the brass nozzle. There we go. And that's how easy it is to put the hot end back in a Voron V2. Well, anything with the afterburner tool head, basically. And I dropped my Allen key underneath the bed. God dang it. Come on. Come on. There we go. Okay. Fold it back in. Put that back down. Boom. Ready to print. So yeah, I really like those nozzles. Triangle Labs makes them. The Nozzle X and Slice's fancy vanadium nozzle. I'm sure they're great nozzles, but I've yet to wear out one of these copper plated nozzles. And until I wear one of those out, I don't see any reason to try anything else. I'm a very, if it works type of person. Okay, so that's good there, that's good there. So, okay, so now we're gonna have to wire up our SKR, or our mini, our Pi Zero. So I'm gonna have to unscrew him. And we are gonna have to make ourselves a cable loom. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let me catch up on chat here. Hi from Argentina. Hello from Canada. Any tips on getting higher chamber temps? My V2 300 does not get warmer than 20 C over ambient. Is Das Boot, do you have it fully enclosed with all the panels on? Like we're talking the side panels, the top panel, the back panel, and the bottom panel. Like every panel's on it, and you're not getting ambient temps over 20 C. After printing PETG, I'm sold on ABS. Yeah, I haven't touched PETG since over 2 years ago when I built my V1. I used PETG to print the parts for it on my Monoprice Slug Mini, and then I haven't touched it since. Have you heard of the Ultimate XL and any thoughts on it? No, I have not heard about the Ultimate XL. It sounds like I don't even know what that is. Let me take a look here. Printer? I'm assuming it's a printer. Let's take a look. That looks like a photocopier. Ultimate XL printer. So, unless it's something else, because I'm not going to search Ultimate XL, because that sounds... You could probably get some random stuff. Let's 3D printer. Okay, how are you measuring your temperatures? Because, the fact that you can't get it above 20 C ambient is kind of weird. And how are you measuring the temperature? Elite Works. Okay, let's take a look here. We've got something big planned, the Ultimate XL. Okay. Belted Z, give it that. So this is what I'm looking at. So we got ourselves a bed flapper here. It's, 3060, 3030. We got a beefy frame, we got bracing. That's a lot of bracing, but we got bracing. That's our print volume, 275, 300, 300. So it's bigger than a thing. Dual drive positive reduction in Y-axis. Where is your y-axis? Okay, your y-axis is there. So what? It's got gearing reduction. Okay. Z-axis, steel and okay. So steel reinforced belts. There you go. Big boom. No, do not use Z. Yeah. See these radiuses here on the belts? That tight turn radius there. When you take your belt, okay, this ain't a belt obviously, but if this is your belt going around that 20 tooth, okay? If it is steel reinforced, it is going to fray and destroy itself. So right off the bat, right there, they don't know what they're doing with the belts. If they don't know what they're doing with the belts, I'd question everything else. Okay? Because that's like one of the first things with 3D printing. You go on any 3D printing group and say, hey, I want to use steel belted, I want to use steel reinforced belts. Everyone's going to tell you, no, don't do it because it fails. And these guys are doing it. Also, the Z here appears to be that you have one Z motor feeding into whatever this is, which is coming through the extrusion to run your Z. So you have one motor with a crap ton of belting between that motor and there for your up and down. So I know why they went with the reduction. They went with all the reduction and whatnot so that your gantry wouldn't come slam into the ground. We overcame this issue with switch wire because it's Core X8, right? If you take your Voron V2 and you flip it on its back, the gantry is going to fall down. So how do you stop your gantry from falling on switch wire? Use an $11 key retainer with, and that holds it up because you just need enough force to keep the gantry in its position. So it's literally a counterweight, which if you know anything about CNC, pretty much every CNC machine has a counterweight to take the weight of the head off of the motor, because your motor really shouldn't be fighting against gravity. It should just be moving it. Okay. Measured on the back gantry using the same sensor as used for the hot end. Okay. Das Boot, what I would recommend is take your print head, move it to XYZ metal. So you see how mine is right there? Leave it right there. Fully enclose the printer. Turn your bed on to 100 degrees Celsius and wait 20 minutes, or actually wait an hour and see what your hot end temperature registers. Because go off that would be a good ambient temperature, because that's like your proper heat soak. I'm thinking if you have that one on the back too close, there might be a draft or something giving you an incorrect reading, or it might not be configured correctly. They have two, okay, so two Y motors on this. So if you have two Y motors, I can only see the one Y motor there. I don't see a Y motor on this side. And two, why would you need two Y motors? I don't see oh, sorry, Y, I'm looking at X. Okay, two Y motors for the bed. Okay, so if you're running a really heavy, beefy bed, I can see the advantage of using two Y motors, but I don't think it gains you anything. Like, we're running just a standard, box standard thing on here, and I think we're getting 5K Excel. If you go, Doc's doing some input shaper wizardry trying it out. I think he's getting like 5K Excel at 120 millimeters a second out of the Y before things start getting funky. And that just with one motor. And you're not going to be printing that fast. As random as this video is random because I literally have like 20 more minutes of content on this thing, because I don't want to go into main sale. Tonight I want to do a full stream just on main sale, because I haven't done it before and I want to try it before I do it on stream, so we're not all sitting there while I try and figure it out. So anyways, so back to this guy. So Metrol PT5, whatever that is, precision touch probe, accurate to 1 micron for bed leveling. Okay. So it's a touch probe. Okay. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Accurate to 1 micron doesn't matter, because you're only ever going to be accurate to one full step of whatever your motor is, because it moves in increments, and we're already pulling one step accuracy off with all of these printers are currently capable of one step accuracy. Okay. How much is this little probe? Oh, anytime you see catalog download and they don't give you a price, that usually means it's expensive. Yeah. It does seem kind of cool though. Don't get me wrong. I'm all for if somebody can come up with a touch probe that works unlike the BL Touch and isn't susceptible to drift and heat issues and all that. I'm all for that. Easily removable extruder module. So it's an E3 V6 and a Bondtech. Okay, that's everyone has that now. It's a good setup. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to poo-poo the setup. It's a good setup. I'm more of a Dragon fan, but it's still good hot end. Extruder PCB distribution for simple and clean extruder wiring. Okay, so it has basically an extruder PCB. So it has a separate controller for the PCB itself, or for the tool head, which you can do that with Clipper. I've seen a few different variations. If they got it working, they got it working. It's cool. This is why they have, okay, so they have the 2 motors for the bed because they have a CNC machined Mic 6 print bed with high temp embedded magnets. So they basically have the bed out of like a Voron V2. They have like our style of bed, which isn't, I'm not saying it's our bed, but it's the same kind of bed we use in the Vorons. And that's why they have 2 motors, because they got a heavy bed. And if you have a heavy bed, even with 2 motors, that thing, starting it and stopping direction changes is going to take quite a bit of force, and I guarantee you their accelerations on the Y are going to be slow. 750 watt, 120, yeah, so they're running a mains bed on a bed flapper. Most people don't recommend that because if the wires ever break from all that movement, but that it is possible. Duet Wi-Fi Maestro, okay, well, it's a Duet. Meanwhile, 220, yeah, okay, so it's good power supply. Like they're using good stuff here. They're using very good stuff here. Some design choices I don't agree with, specifically the belts. The belts and the way their Z is set up looks kind of weird. Like they have, and it's all on, oh, it's not on rails. Okay, the x-axis is on rails, but your Z and your Y are on rods and bearings. Okay. Yeah, it's just kind of a weird, funky design. Like, I got nothing against it. I'm thinking it's probably going to be expensive. Yeah, $1750 US. So you can easily build... Yeah, and there's one in action. Yeah, and those look like 9 or 50... Yeah, those are 9mm belts, too. So those are beefy belts. So, yeah. Let me see. Oh, it doesn't show the back. Nothing shows the back. Okay, that hot end's a standard style hot end. Nothing... Okay, you got the motor there. That's cool. Ethernet cable. Okay. So you got a generic umbilical. You got the motor with the heat sink on it. Yeah, it's an overkill, but I still don't like the design. Like, look. Okay, so your Y is reduced. So yeah, you're going to have more resolution, but you're not going to get anywhere near the speeds. So this thing I could see being solid as hell, but being slow. I can see this being a slow printer. And if they do try, yeah, there's your Y setup, or your Z. I do not like that. I do not like that at all. That is way overcomplicated. Way overcomplicated. At least you won't have to deal with lead screw wobble. Yeah, I see the thing just being... It's kind of cool, but it just way overkill, over-engineered, over... Yeah. 1800. You can build a 350 V2 for that, and it'll probably... I guarantee it'll probably outperform it in every aspect. The only difference is you'll have to build it yourself. Yeah, that probe, 8330. Ooh. That's an expensive probe. Remember... Currently, we are getting 1-step resolution. I can get 1-step resolution for my Z out of that guy, that guy, that guy, and probably this guy. Or actually, no, not this guy, because it doesn't use one. Out of a $3 Chinese PL05N probe. $3. And a 10-set BAT85 diode is giving me an inductive probe with 1-step accuracy. Yeah. And no enclosure. Yep. Good point. All these are designed to be fully enclosed. Only one of mine is fully enclosed at the moment, but all these are designed right off the bat to be fully enclosed. So yeah, I need to get my DuPont connectors out. Where are my DuPonts? I do not like DuPonts, but I need them. And we need some wires. Do I have some wires? Do I want to use some fancy wire for this? Yeah, let's use some fancy wire. So we're going to use some fancy wire. So right now, you can see my mess, my glorious mess. So we're going to have to wire up our SKR Mini here to our, here we go. And then pi 0 pinout. There we go. I really wish you had somewhere to offer hardware kits. The Lightspeed, there are a few vendors. There's a few on AliExpress. There's Fermio Labs that offer some components in kits, but we don't have any official, like, buy this and build this Voron kit. I think there is a vendor that does it for the Vzero on Ali. I'm not 100% certain of that, but I think it is a thing. The reason for that is we are not a company. We're just a bunch of guys that do this for fun. And none of us want to kind of take the undertaking to set up a company and source out all the parts for a kit and inventory and everything. Because I guarantee you, if you're based in the Western world and you try to start selling Voron kits for a profit, you are going to lose your money. Because you won't be able to. For the price and everything, it's not going to be worth it. But you get to learn a lot about printing and component sourcing and whatnot by going the full DIY do-it-yourself route. I will say that. You will learn more building a Voron than you will, messing around with an Ender 3, for example. So I don't know what kind of wiring this is. It's just a 4 connector sleeve. I'm just using this because what we got to do is, let's go to this screen. So we're going to take our Raspberry Pi Zero, which as you can see here has 5-volt ground, a TX and an RX pin here. So these 4 pins, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And then if you look on your Skr Mini E3, and if you look on your TFT header, which is right here, and you go down here, you have 5-volt ground, TX, and RX. So what this will allow you to do is get 5 volts in ground to power your Pi and communicate with it through UART with the 4 wires. So you don't need a USB connection, you don't need a separate power supply, you don't need a buck converter, and you just need 4 wires. So that's how we're going to power our Pi Zero, because the Pi Zero only needs less than an amp. So yeah, I have seen issues too with the hardware kits. I think it's Blue Rolls, their connection, like you buy the connector kit, like the quality of the components aren't the greatest. And you don't really have full control, right? Some kits, oh, this kit has this part, but this part sucks. You got to buy it from somewhere else. Or you could just buy it all good right off the bat. Plus, with a Voron, you order extra, so when you go to build your second one, you don't have to order as many parts. And then you have leftovers from the second, and then you build a third, and before you know it, you have a whole room with them. I hate DuPont connectors, by the way. They are a very kind of crappy connector. Actually, that's an idea for a stream. I know I see it on like some of the tech guys and PC guys where they do a stream where they just rip on stuff. So I might do that. I might just do a stream where I sit here and go through AliExpress printers and other home-built printers and just critique them. I'm sure that'll go over well with some people. When sourcing the machine screws and nuts, are there any kits that have a large amount of just the bolts? All the kits I have, you're never going to have enough washers, trust me. More extra washers is usually not a bad thing. And usually they're so cheap it doesn't matter if you get extras. I haven't looked at any of the kits personally. Like, I'll admit I'm somewhat spoiled, as I used to have well, I still kind of do. I work in a tool shop. I can go up to my Fastenal rep and have them just order me stuff for cost, basically. Well, I used to be able to before COVID. But, so I basically have this cabinet here is filled with all the random screws and whatnot. So I haven't actually had to source screws and fasteners and whatnot for a build since like my V1. So I don't know what the best source of locating is. What I will say though, I did this for switch wire, where you just buy those random kits for the most part that have, you know, these guys. Go on AliExpress and buy these guys. Usually these have enough of the random size ones, and then you only have to source like the 2 or 3, you know, the M38s and all the stuff that you need 100 of by themselves. Because trust me, having extra is always good. You never want to have just enough to finish the build, especially with like stuff like bearings and screws and fasteners, any sort of consumable. Simply for the fact that is, you know, we finish the design and like, say, you know, a couple months down the line, oh, hey, there's a bug fix or an update or something, and all you need is a couple screws and you can swap out with the new printed parts. Now you got to order all new screws again and everything. So it's good to have basically a stock on hand. That's always been the way I've kind of looked at it. Okay, so we are going to go with, let's use this funky color as our 5-volt. I got what I got green, yellow, black, blue, and brown. So green, yellow will be our 5-volt. Let's go with that. Which way do these go in? Like that. So there's our 5-volt, and then we'll use our black as ground. And then TX, we'll go with blue. So TX is blue, and RX will be brown. And I don't have my tweezers. I always lose my tweezers. I'm going to find them when I step on them, I know that. Oh, there they are. LDO has good stuff for the frames. I will say LDO, from what I've seen and what other people have said, they have very good items. I will say LDO, from what I've seen, has good frames. Plus they got all the fancy colors. Which kind of sucks because they only sell through resellers, and their Canadian reseller doesn't really have good inventory. Like they're supposed to have updated by now with a bunch of stuff, and they haven't. So unfortunately, I don't have access to any of their fancy colored frames, because I kind of do want to build something with one of their fancy frames, but I don't have access to it, so I can't. Okay, so there we go. So that is how we're going to hook it up. So we got pin, there we go, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we got 5-volt ground, UART right there. So now we're going to reinstall this. I know Jason might sell directly. I just need to hit him up, and I'm not even sure what I need, because I'm not sure what I'm doing for builds, future builds. There might be something I do, but it's kind of not firm yet if it's happening or not. Like, I didn't even plan on building a switch wire. The switch wire was literally like complete impulse. You know what? I want to build something to play with dual extrusion, so I built the switch wire. And that actually used up a lot of my extra components I had lying around from previous builds. So I'm now officially out of a lot of spares. Although I do have all these motors and all the hardware off of the crappy i3 to use. So I do have hardware still. I probably could build 2 functional printers with the random crap I have, but they wouldn't be good printers. Catch up on chat here. I need to find a source for straight lead screws for the rail core. I would recommend getting integrated lead screws. Usually integrated lead screws is the way to go for, if you have them independent, you're more likely to have wobble. Yeah. let's see here. David, what store do you have? Like if it's one of the stores on the Voron Discord, it's okay to post it. Build a V 1.8. I had a V1. I started off with a V1. Tallboy was originally a V1, but that big. Oh, Peninsula. Yeah, Peninsula. Go ahead. That's one thing. I'm horrible with names. Like I'm really bad with names. So if I get names mixed up with what you are on Discord and here and other things, don't be offended, please. But yeah, good vendors, like, there's very few vendors on my, like, poo-poo list. Pretty much everyone in this hobby, for the most part, kind of doesn't try to screw anyone over, because everyone talks to each other. That's the thing, right? Like, I work in the tool trade. It's kind of the same thing. You get a bad rep in one shop, and everyone knows. So, you piss off one group of people into, like, he goes to the 3DP Discord, he bitches. Somebody there sees it, posts in there, in the Ender Discord, and then they see it, and next thing you know, you've lost 30% of your base. So people try to be nice for the most part. Okay. Oh, the 20-tooth pulleys. just F695. Just stack them up, 2 of them. No, I wouldn't do that for Zed. Question about the V2.4 wiring. Same color ribbon or color-coded, sleeved inside the chain, or just chains? I recommend using the PTFE wire that we recommend. It's all black, so you are going to have to kind of label them as you go. One, it looks really nice, but the PTFE wiring survives better in the chains, we find. I have silicone wiring in mind because, one, the PTFE wire is really expensive in Canada, and I haven't been able to find a cheap source. And 2, I've slathered the hell out of it with PTFE grease, and it's kind of working, but I still have wear issues. So I am going to have to rewire both of my V2s at some point in the future. I'm just hoping that there becomes a cheap source of the PTFE wire in Canada before that. Now, you can apparently sleeve it to get a little bit more, but the problem is it's kind of bulky in the chains. They might not flex well, and you need a right size sleeve for it. So I would recommend getting the PTFE wiring. You should be okay without having to sleeve it in the chains by themselves. I just placed my last with... Yeah, there are colored kits. There depends on what country you're in. Some countries have a lot more options than others. Up here in Canada, we don't get squat. Like Amazon, and unfortunately the border is straight shut down. So even though, in 30 minutes I could be in the US if I really wanted to, I literally can't get there because it's shut down. PTFE wire. So yeah, they make their arraymen. So they make the 10 color kits. Well, here's a 5 color kit, 24 gauge PTFE wire, $269.14, but I get free shipping. Now, they do have a spool here of 24 gauge for $40 for 100 feet. I don't know how many spools I would need to buy, but there's 100 feet. And even the Bayfen Bay chains, like this is why I buy mine off AliExpress. These are $41 plus free shipping, and they won't show up for a month. So they're still coming from China. But yeah. Yep, $66, $42, $33. Oh, here. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's 30 gauge. That's too small. So yeah, Canada. So yeah, so that's why I still use silicone wires, because the let me find one. You know, the Strive Day boxes that have the 5 spools of the silicone 20 gauge or 24 gauge. That stuff's still like $20, roughly. So the stuff with the silicone wire, if you are running the we jumped to silicone after Cat 5 started failing in the whatever we were using it in, because it's Cat 5 and it can't take the bend radius. Because at the time we went with Cat 5 because, hey, that's what Tom Salamander recommends, right? If you go watch his video on how to wire up a printer, and everyone was using Cat 5 because Cat 5 in an umbilical works just fine. Like, I'm sure I could wire this guy up in Cat 5 and it would probably work fine because it has an umbilical. Anything with an umbilical. But once you start putting it in a drag chain or confending the bend radius, like we had with the tape chains back in the V2.1 days, or even the V2.0 with the drag chain or the belt chain, once you start confining it, it wears out and it bends and it breaks. So silicone wire has a high strand count of thin wires, so it handles it just fine. The problem is the silicone sleeving itself, that's wearing out now. So on the drag chains, if you have like the cheap China chains like I have, it actually will wear away and you'll start seeing little bits of the silicone on your where your drag chains run. And once you start seeing that, you know your wires are starting to get worn out. And once they wear through, then you have bare wire exposed, you have the risk of a short. David, don't hate on Canada. They just have really crummy neighbors and shipping. We have neighbor. We got one, and it's spelled with a U. I meant neighbor, like neighbor is spelled with a U. And our neighbor is spelled with a U. And yes, our shipping sucks. Because the problem is with Canada, it's like we only got like 37 million people, and we're the second largest country in the world. So we're all within 300 kilometers of the U.S. border, though, because it is nice to be where it's warm. Like, technically, I live in South Detroit if you want to get there. Yeah, I know. Like, the silicone wire works. The problem is you just have to be careful. You know what? I actually had better luck with the printed chains. If you use the printed chains, like use I think the Germans call it the Panzer chains. The German section of our Discord, they come up with some amazing shit. Like, in terms of like high quality stuff, they do some crazy good shit. I hats off to them. But I had less issues with the printed drag chains causing wear. Simply for the fact, I think that it's not as sharp. The issue with the drag chains wearing out the PTFE is it's just, you know, it's injection molded nylon. I think I did a test on it. I think it's nylon or PCABS or some sort of PC, but it's sharp edges from the molding, basically rubbing and wearing out the wire sleeving. That's what it is. So you either need a much larger bend radius or you need to protect it. So what I did on V224 is I took all my wires and the drag chain itself, and basically I lubed the ever-loving hell out of it with PTFE grease. And so far it seems to be working. So I might do that on Tallboy if it becomes an issue and switch wire. But I'm trying to basically put as many hours on this thing as I can to see if that actually helps in any regard. So I'm not too sure if it does or does not. So I don't see any wear, and I don't see it building up anymore, but it also could just be all stuck in the grease. So I don't know yet. Yes, the Germans, so group buys, they do eSun ABS Plus group buys by the ton. over there. Like, I love my eSun ABS Plus. I buy that stuff by the case. They buy it by the ton. Red Green Show. Love that show. Like, I think everyone in Canada has watched that show for quite a while. Okay, so we got to wire it up. So we got the TFT there. So we got 5 pins. We're not going to use the first pin because the first pin is RST, whatever that is. So we have 5 volt ground TX RX. So our 5 volt is that guy. Our ground is black. Get a camera angle so you can see what I'm doing. Now, I had, what was it, TX that was blue? Let's see here. Yeah, TX was blue, and then RX. And do they have TX and RX? Yeah, so it's the same thing. So TX is blue, and then RX. Yeah, 5 volt ground TX RX. And then 5 volt ground TX RX. 5 volt ground TX RX. Yeah, so it's the same orientation. Just wanted to make sure. And then that literally just plugs into the TFT header. And the 5 volt would be the closest, 'cause I'm assuming based on that, the 5 volt is the closest to those. So it would just be like that. And there we go. Now another thing you can do is we're going to feed this guy some power. And if you're really worried, is you can take your multimeter and feed her out the pins. So we still got light. The light on the SSR isn't turning on, so we don't have power going to the bed, luckily. Get my multimeter. That should be 5 volt and ground. Oh, RSC is reset. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. 5 volts. Yep. So that means, oops, should turn it off. Am I using clipper on the view? Oh, no, David. There we go. And let me make sure I get power to the Pi now. No sparks. Okay, we got power to the Pi. And we're good. No sparks. Raspberry Pi is getting power. And actually, if I remember correctly, I should be able to I think I can actually talk to it, because I think I have an image on it right now. Let me log into my router. How much PVTF wire do you really need for a 2.4 300 millimeter? I unfortunately don't know, because I've never actually measured. I think if you look in the guide, the sourcing guide does give you a list of how much wire to order. 218. Okay. Nope, that's not what the one I want. 218, 192, 168, 218. I think that's the only Pi I have online right now because all my other printers are off. I'm just trying to connect to this Raspberry Pi itself to make sure it actually is functioning. Site can't be reached. Oh yeah, because it's a Pi Zero trying to load Octoprint. So we'll be here next week when it loads. Raspberry, if you're listening, the guys that make the Raspberries, make a dual core version of this little guy. I want a $10 dual core. Well, it should be talking to it because it's the only Raspberry Pi in the house I have, and it's the only one my router is picking up because I got 4 of these guys, and that's the only one that's plugged into anything right now. Because that one on top of there is off, that one's offline, and that one's offline. So, yeah, okay, I'll worry about it later. Okay, so as of right now, we have all the electronics done. Need a little bit more cable management here. And then we're going to put our skirts on, and then mechanically, it's done. So more zip ties, because you can never have enough zip ties. We'll put our skirts on. I lost my snips. Where did I lose my snips to? Over here. Go. Let's see. Yeah, $11 to ship something to Canada. Yep, I believe it. Yeah, our shipping is horrible up here. Like, to get anything anywhere is expensive, and if you want it there fast, it's even more expensive. Like, we really get screwed when it comes to shipping, unfortunately. Oh shoot, I might not have enough, what size screws do you need for these skirts? I think you need 6 mil. Do I even have enough? Yeah, let's use the flathead. Screw it. Screw it, flatheads. Yeah, Chris, I only have one Pi that's powered on at the moment, and according to my router, it had a Pi connected to it, just because it's popped up saying Octoprint. So I'm assuming it's working. It's just probably like it just has an SSD card in it that I know had Octoprint on it at some point in its existence. So I'm assuming it's working. I'm not too concerned at the moment. Oh wait, no. Now I'm just putting skirts on because that is actually the last part of the hardware assembly on this guy we got. Maybe it is 8 mil. Yeah, mainsail is amazing. Like the fact that you can pull off all that in such a small image. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Octoprint when it's running up and running. It's just it's so bloated now. I need to buy a lot more screws. I am running low. That's gonna be annoying. There we go. Okay, 1 screw in, 6 to go. Hi from Greece. Just came in 5:30 in the morning. Oh, that is early, man. Should be sleeping. That is way too early. So just so anyone's unaware, like I do keep all the VODs for all the streams. So if you miss a stream, you can always catch up on it. They're all on my channel. It takes about a day for YouTube to process them to actually have the chat show up, but the chat is all there. That's why I don't play any music as well. I did try playing background music at first, but if anything gets copyrighted, I pretty much have to delete that section of audio, and then once you edit a video in YouTube, for some reason you can't play chat back anymore. So I'm pretty much screwed to have quiet streams. So if you want to listen along, I just have lo-fi hip-hop beats to relax to playing in the background usually whenever I'm streaming. Chris, the actual like straight up install, like one-click install, is not public release yet. It's still in beta, and we don't like pushing like pure beta stuff out because it's a lot of the reason. Like, if you think back to why for the longest time we didn't even release any of the Voron stuff publicly, was simply for the fact that ooh, I'm missing a screw. We didn't want any fracturing of the community because of different like revision changes and whatnot. So like if we were to release the beta for main sale and somebody makes a change in it on their own, and then next thing you know, there's like 2 lines of main sale now, which one do you use, and yada yada yada. So right now it's still internal testing only, but once it's done, it'll be released. Like, we're not hoarding it, put it that way. It'll be put out public pretty quick. Yeah, we didn't. They also don't want it. Like, I will say, I'm not working on it. I know, you know, Hello World is about all I know in coding. But I will say, it's simply for the fact they don't want to put out something that may have issues and screw people over. This is another reason I hate ball and Allen keys in these applications, is they get caught. Yep, so we have some people guinea pigging it right now. Like right now, you still can't install it the long way around. It's just like the one-click installer is still being fiddled with. And somehow we managed to get webcam support. That's something Duet doesn't have. So it can't be a Duet clone, as everyone calls it. Or a Duet web controller clone. They don't have a webcam. Yeah, basically the one-click install image is literally a copy and paste from somebody's SD card of the full install. So it's not proper. You gotta be careful with certain things. I remember a while ago, somebody was like, "Oh, hey," because I run Duet firmware on 26 here. Somebody was having trouble, so I just sent them my config file and just, "Oh, hey, use this as an example." And he's like, "Oh, great, thank you for giving me your Wi-Fi password." I'm like, "Oh, great, I forgot to edit that out." So. Okay, drop the screw. Where did the screw go? It's gone. Okay, this is the last hardware component to put on this thing. And then we are done. We have a finished assembled printer. Minus the enclosure. I don't know when I'll do the enclosure on this guy. To enclose it, I will have to like go to Home Depot or something and hunt down some acrylic and cut it myself, because unfortunately this is like 1 centimeter too small to use like pre-cut acrylic in whatever size is the minimum size from Home Depot. So I'm gonna have to like cut it myself and whatnot, because in Canada we don't have tap plastic, so we can't get the easy pre-cut, relatively well-priced stuff. We gotta make do with the crappy stuff, unfortunately. Yeah, Norman, I know it should. I don't know why it doesn't, because we had that on the V2 skirts had a little hole, but this one doesn't, and I actually don't know why. That's a good question. Maybe it does, and these are just old skirts because I printed off the old file I had. But okay, so once all your electronics are kind of together, you do want to make sure nothing is sticking past your feet. Like, you don't want anything dangling down. Flip it over. And the only reason that I have these two boxes here is just so I didn't pinch the Bowden tube and the wires. So we can get rid of those. Make sure nothing is hanging down again. We are good there. And there we go. We have ourselves an assembled Vzero. Oh yeah, I shouldn't be moving it too quick. I got wires hooked up to the controller now. Okay, so at this point, is the Vzero just a smaller V2? Yes. No, there is 0 part commonality between the Vzero and the V2. It's still Core XY, but it's got, it's got a moving bed versus the V2's fixed bed moving gantry. So it's more in common with a V1. But it uses 1515 extrusions, MGM7. Basically, no major part or hardware is compatible between the two. It even uses NEMA 14 motors. And for those who don't know how small a V0 is, this is a 250 millimeter spec V2, which is the smallest standard size. And you can put a V0 in a V2 and still close the enclosure. So yes, the V0 is small. It's meant to be a small printer. So it prints, it's 120 millimeters cubed of print volume. It'll go as fast as you can make it go. So at this point, what I would do, make sure your XYZ limits are activating, and they're all clicky switch. So what you can do is you don't need to load up your firmware or software yet. You can literally just listen for the click. And they should all activate before you actually reach the max limit of travel. Now the Z one, you have to kind of set manually because you have a little screw in the back. So what you can do is you're going to have to basically adjust, it's kind of crappy, but you have to adjust the screw, or you move the actual limit switch up and down so that the switch activates before your nozzle strikes the bed. You could also drop the bed because you have adjustable nuts, because you're going to have to manually level this bed. So I'll cover that in the next stream. But I wanted to get the actual assembly of this printer done, and as you can see, it is assembled. So I'll zoom in with the camera and we'll do some, quote unquote glamour shots. Yeah, good enough. Okay. Everyone can take a look. So that's the front. So as you see, we do have the wires sticking around because I wrapped them around. And as you remember from last week, we did have the issue with the making sure that the wires had enough clearance back here so they weren't pushing on the belt. Side view. This is how the back turned out. So as you can see, our back's pretty bare. We just have the extruder, the Pi Zero, and our inlet right here. And our Z motor. And there's your A and B motors right there. So we do have a lot of free room here. Now here's the thing, if you were running this, with the DC power, you would just have a little inlet plug here, so you could have your SKR here, your Pi Zero here, and you literally wouldn't need anything underneath at all if you were running with the external power brick. But since we're not, we have to have a power supply. So that's what we got on the bottom here. So we have our LRS 124, we got our SKR Mini E3 V2, we got an Ssr here, and the SKR is powering the Pi Zero. So that is how it looks. And then we got our pocket watch extruder back here. So for the pocket watch, what a lot of people do, and what I will probably end up doing, is let me find one. Yeah, that'll do. That may be too short. Where is my bone tube? Okay, so this is much longer than you need, but the pocket watch is kind of funky because it feeds from the bottom here, okay? So what I did previously is through one of the gaps in your bottom, your grill, you feed a piece of bone tube up and into the bottom of your extruder, and then you just cut it like right here or wherever, and then you feed the filament in there, up through the back and then in. So that's how I run the feed in, because I usually don't have, I have it mounted against the wall, so I don't have room behind it. So that's how I ran my filament in before. we go. And actually, I am actually kind of impressed how well I like this color scheme. Originally, I wanted to do the ASA, which I don't have any examples of it, unfortunately. But I wanted to go with ASA for my colors. But I couldn't get it to print well. I was having issues with it, and I said screw it. And I have a crap ton of eSun ABS Plus in black. So I just went with that instead, because that's like my go-to. So yeah, I'm happy how it turned out. We'll hopefully get it moving next week, or hopefully Monday. Monday night I plan on having a stream. As far as I know, that should be okay. I don't think I have anything going on. So Monday night I may do the main sale stream. If I go to do the stream, as always, I'll have it up a couple hours before, posted that I will be doing it at what time, so you won't miss it when I go live. So yeah, so what time is it now? So we still got about 20 minutes left before I call it. So as always, I'll leave it an open floor. If anyone has any questions about anything, go ahead, shoot. If anyone wants any, wants, like we were looking at that other printer earlier, if you want me to look at anything, critique anything, go ahead. We've got 20 minutes to kill here, and I'm going to be cleaning up in the meantime while we're talking, because my room's getting a mess here. I gotta clean this. Okay, let me catch up on chat here. This is what I need. I need more room for my mouse. Oh. Actually. Okay, I actually think I closed the stream. 1 second here. Let me load my stream back up. No, that's not what I wanted. No. 1 second, I accidentally closed the stream, so I can't see chat, so this will be a second. Videos. Oh, I just hit 3,500, well, it happened today. I got over 3,500 subscribers, so I can't believe I actually have that many subscribers. I want to say thank you for everyone who is subscribed. If you're not subscribed, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button as well. Because if you're subscribed, you get access to the content right away because you see when I upload it. Okay, why the heck isn't this working? I want to get back to the create, go live, create post. I already am live, so I want to be able to see my live feed. There we go. Okay, that's what I click. Okay. So yes, if you're not subscribed, don't forget to subscribe. You should do that now. Hit that button and all that other YouTuber stuff. Okay, does the Raspberry Pi 4 is overkill for main sale? Yes, it is overkill, but if you already have one, hang on to it. It's still good hardware. Personally, I'm actually kind of looking at the 3A, I think it is, which is like a Raspberry Pi 3 stripped down. So it's cheaper, but you still have multi-core support, because that's one of the things in Vzero. I know we're all harping on or hyping up, main sale running on a Pi Zero, but we still don't know if it runs long-term reliably. We're still kind of new at testing it out. It's still beta. So I wouldn't rush out to replace all your Pis with Zeros just yet, because we still need the data on it, because who knows, we might have issues once we start pushing it really fast long term, because most of us are trying these on Zeros. Once we start trying them on V2s and whatnot, we might be running into issues. So yeah, so I wouldn't rush out to replace it yet, but as of right now, it seems like it's okay. But still beta, just wait a little while. So that's why I'm thinking about the 3A. Your best chance to spend is probably one of the Magic Studio kits from AliExpress. I've seen them. You will get a functional printer. They do have some iffy hardware in there though. And can V0 print nylon with stock bomb? Nylon, I think you need 260. Like hardware wise, you can reach the temperatures. I don't foresee any major issues printing nylon, other than I can't remember what enclosure temps you need for nylon. I know I've done it on my V2. I had like a small sample spool of nylon, and I printed with it a while ago, and it was okay. So I think you should be able to, but you're not going to get super high chamber temps. So if you can print ABS plus 20 degrees, you're fine. Did you guys ever use the Ssr V1.1 as the recommended mainboard? I don't believe so. We went straight to the V1.3 for the Skr. How do you feel about Annex printers? I don't have an Annex printer, so I won't comment on that. So it was working on Ender 3 to switch wire conversion. Is that something the Voron team have looked at? It has been looked at. There's somebody working on it. I've seen somebody working on one in that channel you're referring to. So I'm sure it will be a thing eventually. Yeah. So the switch wire is designed to basically, if you already have an existing printer, you have that old Mark III or the Mark II or an old CR10 or that's kind of big, but you have an old i3 Mandela bed flinger printer and you want to reuse some of the hardware, you want to reuse the bed, you want to reuse the hot end, whatever. It's meant to use that old hardware to kind of bootstrap it into a new modern printer. That's kind of what the gist of switch wire is it's designed as a scratch build, but it's meant to be used like stuff you already have, kind of. So, oh, I lost my mouse. There we go. If you can't get PTFE, get silicone. Yeah, silicone wire, high strand silicone wire is the second best option. Can an Ender 3 print the ABS parts for a Voron? Yes, it can. You do need to do some modifications. I recommend swapping out the heat break. I think it's the Chimera heat break, which allows you to have an all metal hot end essentially, because you don't want to use PTFE line when printing ABS temps. So you do want to get, I think it's the Chimera. 2, rip out the gross stock extruder. That thing is garbage. Build a Mobius 3 or something, or buy a Bondtech BMG and just use the kit. Get not a Bondtech, get a Triangle Labs BMG extruder. Use the extruder on your Ender 3 to get a better extruder, because the stock one is garbage. Print your Voron parts, and then once you have your Voron parts, you can take your TL BMG extruder and use that to build your afterburner. Ryan Wilson, $10. Thanks for doing these streams. They've helped me. They've helped my V0 build tremendously. That's good to hear, man. That's why I do the streams. I do the streams to help everyone build their printers and to kind of keep me sane. I started doing these when COVID hit and we couldn't go out, so I was stuck inside all day. So I started streaming. So, but yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Glad they're helping. Or use the Tiny M pocket watch. Yeah. So basically, I needed to do a whole video on why that extruder sucks. But the reason those extruders suck, and that's the majority of the problems I see what people have with the Ender 3, CR10, and other entry-level printers, is that extruder. So the extruder itself, if you think filament's round, okay? This is how advanced we're gonna go. I'm gonna fire up MS Paint, okay? Okay. So here's the problem with the Ender 3 extruder, okay? You have your filament, okay? We're printing ABS. We got black. There's your filament, okay? So, if you look at the gear teeth on the extruder, it's like this. Oop. They're like that. If you look at them, they're flat. They're flat gears. So, when they're pushing the filament along, yeah, they cut into the filament a little bit, but you're really only pushing this little portion of filament here, and then your idler gear is also flat, so you're deforming your filament here, so you're really barely pushing your filament, and you're cutting into it, and then you're also squishing it against something flat. Now you do see some where they have the gear, but the gear itself is curved a little bit, right? So the gear, the idler gear has a little notch in it, or it's grooved, so it's not quite squishing it as much. So at least this side doesn't get rounded, but the feed gear is still flat, okay? And then you have like the BMG gears that we all like, where both sides are curved. So it's cutting into the filament a little bit. It's not cutting in as much, as there's more surface-to-surface contact, so you don't need as much force to push the filament along, because you're having more surface grip on it, because both gears, if you look at them, are curved, and they're both pushing on both sides. So you're getting good feed from both sides, versus good feed on one side versus trash feed on one side and squishing it on the other side. So those gears are absolutely horrible, because they are literally like the worst way that you can push filament. Bearing using to flat gears completely. Okay. And then for the Ender 3, for enclosing it, just build a cardboard box around it and cut a little window and cover it with saran wrap so you can see inside. That's all you really need to do to print ABS. Like, people, you don't need a super crazy enclosure. You mostly need something to keep the draft out and the ambient temperatures in. So yeah, those extruders are garbage. They need to go bye-bye. That is way old tech. And crap quality control as well. Like, it's a cheap printer, but the problem is you will never be able to build a printer that functions for cheaper than an Ender 3 that is as good as an Ender 3. Like, yeah, you can, I can break out some old CD drives and we can build a $50 printer, but you're not going to have the print volume or the ability to print ABS on it, that's for sure. No, Unmaker. Chimera, don't use the Chimera extruder. Basically, the Chimera uses a heat break that is size for size compatible with the stock hot end on the Ender 3. Now, the stock hot end on the Ender 3 heat break has a PTFE lining, which if you heat it up to ABS temperatures are going to release noxious fumes, which are bad, no. So what you do is you take the heat break from the Chimera hot end and you put that in, you replace the heat break in your Ender 3 hot end, because the Chimera one's all metal. So you just need the heat break. And the extruder is the part that pushes the filament, not the part that oozes the filament. That's the hot end. The extruder is the thing that pushes the filament. Sometimes the extruder is directly on the print head, like you see on a Voron afterburner, or sometimes it's separate, like you see on the Vzero. So I know the terminology in 3D printing is absolutely horrible. Like, we use terms that really describe other things in other fields, and like technically all printers are Cartesian unless they're a polar, right? They work off XYZ, that's Cartesian. But we call bed flingers Cartesians, and these are core XYs, and yeah, terminology is funky in 3D printing. So. Oh yeah, and this is the other guy. So, I still have the Raspberry Pi Zero. It still has one open USB port, because it only has one. So the plan is I have this little, good old generic China $4 spy camera that does 1080p at like 6 FPS. I'm going to try and figure out where I can mount that in here where it doesn't impact the camera or the hot end. So I'm thinking I can probably get it right about there. And the hope is, yeah, I'm hoping I can sort of find somewhere to mount it, because I don't think I'm ever going to actually fully enclose this guy. Because I have plenty of enclosed printers, so I don't think I'm going to enclose this. But I might mount this guy something like here, because it has like a 270 degree. It's got a super wide angle lens on it. So I think I'm going to try and mount it right about there. And then it's got, detachable wires. So I can run fresh wires directly to the Pi Zero. So I'm thinking I'm going to try and mount him right about there. Yeah, I can't remember. This guy was only like $5 or $6. And it's crappy resolution, but it's wide, or it's 1080p low frame rate, but wide angle. So it works okay. It's not the greatest, but it was cheap and it worked. So I wanted something small. Yeah, I make no promises the Pi Zero won't start on fire with a camera. Yeah, that's another thing we're still kind of funky testing with. So Ender 3 upgrade, extruder, change the Chimera heat break, cardboard box with window, print ABS V1/2 parts. Pretty much use a Pi. Oh, I do have a Pi camera. I do have a Pi camera. I forgot. I do have a Pi camera. Oh, it's a Raspberry Pi camera Rev 2.2. Yeah, and then I got to deal with the ribbon cable. This is another thing I was going to try. Originally, I was going to actually run this guy using one of these orange Pi Zeros, but the Wi-Fi driver on them is absolutely garbo. So it sits in a box. And again, I also was going to run this guy using the SKR Mini V1.1, which is the one that uses swappable drivers, because this guy's actually smaller than the E3. So I was going to originally use this board because it was smaller, but it's lacking on quite a few features. This thing is actually very bare bones. Like, you can't even run a bed off of it, like a heated bed. But it has, yeah, this was weird. Yeah, it's got a hot end hookup. Yeah, it's got one extruder. Yeah, one extruder, and that's it. One fan. One extruder, one fan, and a, you need to run like a MOSFET for the bed. Okay. So there we go, everyone there. So let me see here. So this will be our next stream. It's mainsail. So literally I just mainsail clipper. Here we go. Installing it. So I'm gonna go through and I'm actually gonna I don't know if I might go through and do the whole installation because I've never done this before. So I think I'm gonna do this myself tomorrow, and then I'll do it all again on stream afterwards. So we will go through it. Dang it. Fixed. I really need to raise that screen like 1 inch. I have like so many of these little rubber duckies from Big Tree Tech. T-Rex got one though. It shouldn't be muted anymore. It says I got audio. Can you hear me? Okay, duck go squeak. Okay. The delay. Okay, everyone. So it's 11 o'clock here. So that's usually roughly the time I call it. So, as always, thank you for joining me tonight. I know the last stream of the build is usually the most boring one because it's just hooking up wiring, but that is all done. We now have our printer functionally complete, electrically complete. The last thing we have to do is firmware, which we'll be doing on the next stream, hopefully Monday. If not Monday, it'll be next Saturday as always. So hopefully we'll have 2 more streams out of this. There'll be one for setting up all the firmware and getting everything kind of making sure your XYZ's movement's right, because you know with Core XY you need to make sure your motion, your motors are correct and everything. It's homing correctly, your PID tunes are correct, and then after that I'm going to do a stream on basically your first print, how to make sure everything's tuned, what you should be looking for, and going over some settings and whatnot. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. Audio off. Do I have audio? I think I have audio. I should have audio. Okay, there was only one person saying that. Okay, so anyways, so yeah, so everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Enjoy your Sunday. Be safe out there, wash your hands, and take care. Peace.